All right, so without further ado, let's introduce our speaker for today. Jody Steiger is a doctor of education with an emphasis on the role of arts in education and social development. She's president of the Asociación AcciónArte para la Educación and the Costa Rican national correspondent of the International Council of Museums Committee for Education and Cultural Action. Steiger is a lighting designer and theater producer. She was director of the National Theater of Costa Rica, where she created the Teatro al Mediodía program. She's participated in more than 500 national and international productions during her career. She received several awards, including the 2017 National Theater Award, the Ancora Award in Theater from la Nación, and a Creativity and Excellence Grant from the Florida Ice and Farm Company. In 2009, she was named Person of the Year by La Nación in the field of culture. Steiger is the artistic advisor for Teatro Espressivo and a member of the board of directors for the Orquestra de las Americas. So here to speak to us today with the presentation, Speak Art, the Use of the Arts in Conversational Development, please welcome Dr. Jody Steiger.
Hello, give me a moment to get this started. Slideshow play from, there we go. I hope everybody can see that.
Yes.
Hello and good afternoon. It is a rainy afternoon. I'm in Guanacaste and it's raining, as they say in English, cats and dogs and cows and pigs as well. We've had quite a lot of rain. Today, we'll be exploring what the arts can contribute to our educational practice in our schools and in our communities. Together, we'll explore the many reasons why the arts must be included in our lives and in all our communities, business communities, social communities, and of course, educational communities. The arts must be seen as a tool to fulfill required objectives in core curriculum, to stimulate economic and social development, and to help develop skills such as creative thinking, observation, innovation, critical analysis, respect for diversity, and in our conversation this afternoon, communication and conversational skills. At the same time, both the practice and the enjoyment of the arts can help us lead a more fulfilling and happier life. And why is that so important? If our students aren't happy in our classes, if they aren't feeling that they're learning, if they're feeling that they're wasting their time or they're frustrated, then they just won't develop the skills we encourage them to cultivate in as successful a way as we would wish. With the help of the arts, we can get our students to talk, to forget about their lack of vocabulary, their fear of making mistakes, and just to let loose and talk with excitement. So often we say that one must live in a country where there's the need to communicate, to truly develop conversational skills. And of course, that's obvious. Need helps promote conversation. I was in Paris in November 2015. At one point in my life, I was totally bilingual English-French. But after so many years not speaking French.
I think we're frozen here for a second. Let's just wait, guys.
We glean from this experience to get our students to stop being self-conscious and to just jump into speaking English. I propose that the arts can trigger a similar effect, and together we can begin to explore some ways that we can do just that. Eric Jensen, the author of a wonderful book called Arts with the Brain in Mind, tells us, it may be more important, finally, to value the non-academic benefits of the arts. Why be sheepish about the possibility that the arts may promote self-discipline and motivation? What's embarrassing about countless other art benefits that include aesthetic awareness, cultural exposure, social harmony, creativity, improved emotional expression, and appreciation of diversity? In other words, if we're enjoying ourselves, we'll learn more. Compare learning when we're doing it on our own for the joy of learning something new, like learning a new video game, or how to use a new gardening tool, or how to build an engine. And to those memories, those unhappy memories we have of what we were subjected to as students and what were our worst past experiences of fairly boring classes, we need our students to enjoy the process. There's a reason why STEM has recently evolved to STEAM, placing the arts in the center of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I'm going to share with you different experiences that will hopefully lead you to reflect on how the arts can become an active part in all our lives, in the communities to which we belong, and in our teaching practice. I'm passionate about the need for the arts and the role they can play in our work. And I hope this session will help begin to create and stimulate your interest for their inclusion in your own classrooms. What do you think could be happening in this image? Take a good look at it. Take a moment. What do you think is possibly happening in this image? With these questions, more than 250,000 fourth, fifth, and sixth grade students in Costa Rica's public school system are learning to analyze, research, express themselves, communicate with others, and just plain think. In their Spanish language classes, they use this methodology that we call Piensa en Arte, think with art. They're developing communication skills. They're learning how to talk with each other. They're developing conversational skills. How do they do that? And more importantly, why do they do that? To truly learn, teaching must touch the soul of the student. Today, I propose to you that the arts can do just that. Learning can be a fascinating, enjoyable, and exhilarating process, or it may be the opposite. Children start school with the joy of learning. They're natural students with innate curiosity. My 4-year-old grandson, who you can see here, has just learned about the planets, their names and placement in the solar system. He laughed with delight at the funny names and was thrilled in making his model of the system. Most importantly, he spoke of it out loud in front of his class. There was conversation, true conversation and excitement. Unfortunately, little by little, young students begin to feel imprisoned within a system that doesn't motivate them to continue learning. Just when is that and why is that? Why did they lose that joy in learning? The various tools and activities that can be devised utilizing the arts can help create a totally different vibe in the classroom, one that's enjoyable, fun, and leads to profound learning. I'd like to give a little theoretical background to the practical ideas I'll be sharing. Rudolf Arnheim, who says, what the quote that you see here, was Professor Emeritus of the Psychology of Art at Harvard University. He developed a theory which he entitled visual thinking. Simply put, thinking is based on images. When children draw pictures, they're telling their first stories. Once my husband and I visited friends staying with their family for 2 weeks. There were problems in the family leading what would eventually be a situation that led to a separation and finally a divorce. The children were aware of the strife and the relationship of their parents, but they weren't able to talk about it. They couldn't express what they were feeling. Just as we were leaving, the smallest child, the 6-year-old, handed us a drawing he had made of us as a going away present. There was a tiny house, a large smiling sun, and 2 very large figures. What was so incredible about the drawing was that the stick figures were holding hands. The hands were overly large for the figures, and they were in the exact center of the image he had drawn. This child could not verbalize the way he felt about the relationship of togetherness between my husband and myself, but he could draw it in the simple stick figures holding hands with a happy sun over the house. And the process works naturally in reverse as well. We develop the ability to speak about something by interpreting images. Rudolf Arnheim writes many things. He takes this concept and develops the process. We create images in our minds and develop those thoughts into words and conversations. In the words of Aristotle, the soul never thinks without an image. Rudolf Arnheim shares with us, visual thinking calls more broadly for the ability to see visual shapes as images of the patterns of forces that underlie our existence, the functioning of minds, of bodies or machines, the structure of societies or ideas. Art works best when it remains unacknowledged. It observes that shapes and objects and events, by displaying their own nature, can evoke those deeper and simpler powers in which man recognizes himself. It's one of the rewards we earn by thinking about what we see. The methodology we have created in our Piensa en Arte, Think with Art program here in Costa Rica is based on these concepts of Rudolf Arnheim. This is a methodology that recognizes that the ability to think and analyze is grounded in the perception of visual information and the effective articulation of what the eye sees and what the brain interprets. Learning to reconsider how we perceive the world around us renews the critical nexus between the eye and the mind. We see, therefore we think. That's what we're going to do now in explanation of our conversation classes and what we can do. We see art, therefore we think something, and we can talk of what we see, of what we're thinking in a natural and enjoyable procedure. Let me tell you a little bit about this program that we began in Costa Rica in 2004 and what it has been able to create since then. But first, before we continue, let me tell you who I am. I was born in New York City. I have a theatrical lighting design and producer for over 45 years. Currently, I'm the artistic advisor for the Teatro Espressivo. And as Mark shared with you all the different things I do and I'm involved with, I'm involved in all aspects of the arts. I've taught theater design at the National University of Costa Rica and worked at the National Theater of Costa Rica for over 30 years. I also worked at the Universidad Latina, where I put the ideas of this methodology into classes with engineering and medical students to help them learn to voice their ideas. The ability to express an idea has constantly been a challenge for engineering and medical students. And by the end of a semester of work with conversations about works of art, the students expressed their gratitude for that which they had experienced and were then able to incorporate into their professional preparation. Again, we see a clear connection between the exercise of how conversations over a work of art, about a work of art, can lead to an improvement in communication and conversational skills. Several years ago, I was part of an innovative doctoral program in education. 100 professionals from different fields were invited to participate in a PhD program where we would be investigating how through our own fields, we could help improve the public school system in Costa Rica. We had to have taught on a university level in our field and have had at least 20 years of experience in our professions. Because of this last requirement, we were jokingly known as the gerontology doctorate. But it was an amazing experience, one that led me to see how and why the arts, the group within which I participated, can be such an important tool for social and educational development and innovation. Although I don't prefer the negative, I believe it's important that we analyze a bit about what the arts cannot do. They're not a quick fix for all the problems in our schools or in our society. We're not going to improve everybody's IQs, achieve higher test scores in our schools, or put a complete end to crime. Although the arts will help with all of those. In fact, various reports, such as ones by the Arts Education Partnership, by Project Zero of Harvard University, and by the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities, suggests that the influence of the arts is actually far wider and deeper than simply improving test scores and class grades. And before we talk about what the arts can do, it's important to mention that in our justification for the inclusion of the arts, especially in our educational institutions, we should not treat the arts merely as a tool to teach other more serious non-art subjects. Yes, we can use the visual arts to teach conversational skills. Yes, we can use sculpture to teach physics. And yes, we can even use dance to teach math. There's a great series of activities where the dance is used to help students understand mathematics. Even we must arts because the arts will give valuable neural systems. Benefits take months or years to assess. And when they eventually appear, they're sprinkled across a wide expanse of experiences, from fine motor skills to tolerance and appreciation of diversity, from creativity to how to better deal with the ambiguities and uncertainties of life, from improved emotional balance to the ability to observe more accurately and finely, from better communication skills to just plain happiness. And these benefits can continue to be reaped throughout our lifetime.
Can you hear me, Jody?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now I can. I'm sorry, we were having some connection issues there. So I stopped your video. I think that's going to help your connection. Okay, I just wanted to let you know that. So we missed about the last minute of what you were saying.
Frozen there. No, it's a black slide. In a minute, we'll be back on something else. So let me just retract for a minute and talk about one of the reasons why I feel the arts are so important. They're benefits that can continue to be reaped throughout our lifetime, not only in formal PK to 12th grade education, but throughout our adult years in non-formal educational experiences. That's my insistence today in leading you through an explanation of how they can help in your practice in improving and developing conversational skills in ESL education. Here we're talking about the effects of a very complex system, and it's almost impossible to assess or measure positive results to any complex system. It's like trying to measure the successes of the space program or the benefits of one country selling oxygen production to another. It just isn't easy. Arts are not efficient. They don't do something immediately that we can say, yes, it's done, or no, it's not done. As Eric Jensen says, arts are about life, growth, and expanding who we can become as human beings. They're about the long view of life. We know something's wrong with our schools. I'm not sure if you want to put the video back on, but I have the next slide available in case you can put the video back
yes,
on.
the slide is on. The slides are visible. It's just your video of your face is not visible. I think that's what was slowing us down. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. We know something is wrong within our schools, within our communities, within our society. We must find a new way to educate our students, to employ the free time of our youth, not just having them use iPads and their phones, and to enrich the lives of our adults. Harvard professor Catherine Snow has stressed the urgency for the development of people who are capable of analysis, interpretation, and creation. First, we must analyze a challenge or a situation. Then we must interpret it for it to make sense in our lives. And finally, we need to create a solution or a way to go about dealing with it. So let's look at that again. Analysis, interpretation, and creation. We're no longer looking for a robot-like feeding back of memorized facts. The citizen of the 21st century needs to analyze facts, needs to interpret them to make sense in his or her own reality, and then create a solution or a way to deal with them. Snow challenges us to build educational systems that will stimulate our students, our children, our youth, and our adults to think and to ask questions, to encourage them to read all sorts of literature, from newspapers, history, poetry, scientific data, and then for them to analyze what they read, interpret what they read, and create a new hypothesis or question so that they can talk about it. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to get our students to be talking about what's in their minds, what their thoughts are. The same is true with looking at art. Looking at images and analyzing them, interpret them, and then create a story from what you see. The thought process stimulates the speaking process. There are periods in human development when we're more open to acquiring certain skills and abilities, and it behooves us to begin with those still in school, although we need to concentrate those same abilities and those same skills with adults, as you can see in these past two slides. Teach a small child a second or third language, and it's easy for them. They'll assume it without accent and with the ease with which they acquired their first or maternal tongue. Teach an older person, and while the ability is there and they can become bi or trilingual, it's a much greater challenge to acquire that same ease. I've spoken Spanish for over half my life, but I didn't begin until I was 27 years old. I still have an accent, and unfortunately and embarrassingly, I still make grammatical mistakes. And so if we've not had the arts incorporated into our lives as preschoolers, is it too late afterwards? Can the arts still have a positive cognitive effect on high schoolers or adults, on senior citizens? There is the need for more study, of course, but in the studies I'll share with you today, we'll see examples of how art practice and appreciation being introduced, refined, and continued can definitely have a positive effect on people of all ages. When I speak of the use of the arts in society, I'm talking about the active production or reception of art. Yes, it must be active in order to have the positive effect it can so wondrously have. And we must be aware of the effect it can have on us. Metacognition, we have to be aware of what we're doing. We must be conscious and reflect on the way active practice or active observation of the arts affects us. By looking at art, analyzing it, and sharing those ideas, we're becoming active participants in the artistic process. One of the most important lessons we learn from the creative or artistic process is to become aware of what we're doing and how we go about it. We must all become artists in our own fields, creative artists, the teacher redesigning the layout of his or her classroom to make it more student-friendly, the parent making a pretty multicolored salad to entice the family to eat more veggies, the bus driver communicating with a friendly hello to each passenger that gets on the bus as a way to take a moment to ensure that the passenger pays correctly and takes an appropriate seat. Becoming aware that there's a creative way to answer a challenge leads us to come up with an idea, represent it, hone it, and communicate it. That is being an artist, to make art, to understand art, to truly observe art, and to talk about the art we're observing with others brings us closer to the creativity inherent in each of us, and it helps us prepare and accustom ourselves to incorporate creativity in our daily lives. Piensa en Arte, Think with Art, is the program I mentioned that's used with 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students in the public school system in Costa Rica. It's coordinated by a partnership between AcciónArte, the Ministry of Public Education, and the Ministry of Culture and Youth. In this program, participants are asked to look closely at works of art, and through a specific methodology, they are asked to describe what they observe, analyze their findings, and come up with their own interpretations of the work of art. It's not important if they discover the correct reading of a work of art. Doesn't matter what the interpretation of the artist was. What counts here is the interpretation of the student based on his or her analysis of the visual evidence that he or she can see looking at the work of art. Remember the words of Catherine Snow: analysis, interpretation, and creation. The methodology trains the students to think, trains them to utilize these 3 steps naturally. They follow an I see, therefore I think, so I'm going to tell you about schema. And this leads us to talk and talk. If we ask our students to talk about what they did this past weekend in our conversational English classes, they often tend to create an answer not based on what they actually did, but rather what they think and feel comfortable to speak about, and what they think and feel they have the vocabulary to discuss. And nobody will know the difference. But when one is looking at a work of art, the conversation must be based on what they can see, on what's there, on the visual evidence. It's a challenge at first, but soon the self-consciousness breaks off, and the excitement of sharing ideas about the works of art spur on an active conversation. All right, we're going to do an exercise now. I've never done this exercise with breakout rooms. I've done it many, many times in person, but I think it will still work. I'm going to show you how this methodology works, but first we're going to do the exercise to give you all the chance to hone your own observation skills. We will be divided into several breakout rooms. I'm going to ask you to look at an image of a painting that you will see in front of you. I believe the link is in the chat group that Mark posted.
Correct.
All groups will have the same image. Each group needs to choose a scribe. Then please look at the image of the works of art in silence for about 30 seconds. Then each person, one at a time, will choose a word, just one word of something you see in that image. It can be a noun or a verb. It may be an adverb or an adjective modifying a previously spoken word, but it must be based on your observation. The scribe will write the words in the chat. Let's say the first person says man. That will be written down. And then the next person can say flower, referring to a different part of the image. Or he can say old, which will modify the first word man. You cannot repeat what has previously been said. The scribe should write these words on the chat box of the group where each person will be able to see them. You may think that the first person has the easiest time of it, but once the first round is completed, we will then go backwards in reverse and each person will add another word. Now the challenge will be for those at the beginning to continue to find another observation. Please don't talk or discuss this amongst yourselves while the exercise is going on. Let's see how quiet we can be during the exercise. Okay, here's a list of the instructions so you can review them. Observe the image in silence. Say a one-word observation and have the scribe write it down in the chat room. No repetitions. You can use a noun or a verb, an adjective or an adverb. You can modify a previously written word. Only mention what you can observe and try to do this process in silence. Remember, the word you write down must represent something you see in the image. If it's a painting by Picasso, you can't write down Picasso because Picasso isn't there, okay? Ready? Everybody understands? When everybody has added 2 words, the scribe will then read the list out loud within the group. And please look at each of the parts of the image where that word can be seen. Afterwards, we'll give it about 8 minutes. After that, we'll come back and the scribe of each group will read the list from their group, will read the list of words while we're all looking at the image. Let's listen carefully to each scribe. To develop our conversational skills, we need to learn to become active listeners. As we listen, we're actively looking for that part of the image that sparked the use of that particular word or group of words. During the exercise, as you're looking for the words, I want you to look at parts of the image at which you didn't look at first. When you're going to give your second work, look someplace else. Develop other parts of the image. You can use a word to describe an action. You can use a word to describe an emotion if you think it's clearly represented and there's visual evidence to suggest it. You can modify a word that was previously used. By reading the words others have written, you may see something new you haven't previously noted. Okay, so Mark,
Yes.
you can go into the breakout rooms.
Great. So we're ready to go, guys. We'll be working in groups of about 6 people. So let's take advantage of these 8 minutes. If someone could share their screen with the image, that would be great. But if that's not possible, at least if everyone is looking at the image on their own device, that will work perfectly. Okay, so let's go. We'll be back here in 8 minutes.
Okay, you're all seeing the image?
Yes.
Great. So will you call upon each group, Mark?
Sure.
And please have each group read the list of the words. And as we're listening to that list of words, look in the image at what is being referred to and see if it deepens your vision of the work. Can you see more things that you hadn't seen prior? Okay.
Okay, so group 1 was Adriana, Claudia, Evelyn, Hector, Jonathan, Roberto, Sergio, Julissa. Do you have your words?
I have them, yes.
Okay, Jonathan.
Okay, so let me read the words. We began with pearls, educate, elegant, family, manners, friends, flirt, smile, communication, complain, conversation, advice, girl, culture, and mestizo.
Cool.
Should we continue with the next group?
Please.
Okay, group 2, Ignacio, Jody. Well, Jody, you were there.
Yeah, I know.
Marcela, Oscar, Silvia. You should be able to unmute yourself now, guys.
Yes, we have family, poverty, young, autism, lack, middle age, aristocracy, hold, wig, fabric.
Group 3 was Florita, Hildardo, Isabel, Patricia, Vladislava.
Okay, our words were old-fashioned, modernism, beautiful, expensive, canvas, relationship, aristocracy, dresses, wig, pearls, colorful, trade, necklace, jackets, military.
Group 4 was Ana, Ariana, Aitel, Romero, Viviana. It was a small group. I'm wondering if they were able to complete the task. Group 5, Aida, Alejandro, Luis Esteban, Mirna, Roberto.
Yes, we have mirror, carpets, flirting, conqueror, social class, witness, coy, fabric, mistress, modesty, market, faceless, and avoidance.
Okay, group 6, Ana Lorena, Elena, Eloisa, Fabiola, Luis, Mauricio.
Okay, I have the list. Listening, necklace, expensive, colorful, child, rug, expressive, hat, coat, light blue, bottoms, woman, fabrics, wig, feel, white, mother, daughter, ruffles, hand, dress, sky, and orange.
Okay, group 7 is very small. I'm not sure if they'll have something. Catherine Quintana, Katia.
Catherine, did you have the list?
Yes, I did it. We write family, interests, colonization, conversation, suspiciousness, sublimation, confident, and wealthy.
Okay, group 8, Gisela, Elizabeth, Patricia, Rolando. Or group 9, Jonathan Mora, Luisa, Lynn, Rocio, Roman.
We have colonial, suspicious, conversation, British, pastel colors, stylish, fancy, curiosity, texture, and Spanish.
Okay, Jody, those are all the groups.
That's terrific. Did you see new things in the image based on the observation of others? I think that's one of the key issues here. For example, I forgot about the pearls. I've seen this image a million times, and it wasn't until somebody in the second group or the first group, I don't remember which one, said pearls, and I went, oh yeah, right, I forgot about the pearls. Fabric, very often people don't see that they're in kind of a market of fabric or in a space where there's all these fabrics hanging in the background. Suspicion is very interesting. Some people said poverty while others said wealth, aristocracy, British, Espanol. It's fascinating to see how we can see different things. Now, in a normal class, using the methodology that we use, this conversation would go on greatly for another hour, where we would be going more in depth. And I, as the facilitator would say, for example, on the word suspicious, what do you see in the image that makes you think possibly there's suspicion? And the person would have to say, look at the face, or look at the way she's holding her little girl's hand, or whatever. But all these words, what's happening is you get so excited about talking about it that you forget you're speaking in English. And that's the key to using art in language skill classes and getting people to speak. We've used this methodology very often with people in businesses, with receptionists who have to deal with English-speaking clients, and they feel very uncomfortable. Well, they start talking about this. They have the English level necessary. They just feel uncomfortable about expressing it. Through the use of talking in a very comfortable classroom where there's no judgment on what's being said, people start talking and they start using their language skills, which is exactly what we're trying to do. How did you feel during this exercise? Was it difficult at first? Did other people's participation add to your understanding of the image or to your experience? We were actively observing, not just looking at the image of a work of art, but we were actively studying it. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the program now. In the year 2004, while I was involved in the investigation for my doctoral dissertation, I came across a program at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, VTC, Visual Thinking Curriculum. In a seemingly simple methodology, MoMA was working with school groups in the New York City area, using art as a stimulus to promote creative thinking schools. I was fascinated with the idea and I wrote to them. Actually, I worked on my doctoral thesis at like in the middle of the night when I come home from the theater. So I wrote to them at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And the next day when I woke up and went and checked my email, they had answered already and said, yes, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to do a pilot project in Costa Rica. So the next morning, even before I got dressed, I had the answer. I knew it was yes, and I was very excited. We've since then developed the methodology specifically for a Costa Rican student body. There were many changes we had to make in what was being done in New York and in what could be done here, primarily because Costa Rican schools are all controlled or under the auspices of one particular group, not like in the United States where every state, every city, every community has its own decisions. So this was something that was being done in Costa Rica on a countrywide level. And it's the only place in the world where this methodology is being used completely in one public school system. It's now an official part of the Spanish language curriculum. It's not given in the art program. It's given in the language skills department, specifically because of what it can create for the study of language and conversation. Today, there are almost 10,000 teachers trained in the methodology. It's a simple methodology, but it's very complex. So it might seem very simple, as you'll see when we go through an example of it in a few minutes, but it's not so easy to maintain within a group. It takes at least a 45-hour training session, and we've had that over the years. We've trained all of the national Spanish language supervisors and the regional Spanish language supervisors, who then train the teachers in their areas. Every child in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade participates in at least 2 lessons a week of this methodology. Now let's see exactly what is this methodology. We're going to go, and here's the image that I said we would go back to a little while ago. I'm going to walk you through a session with students. Starts out with the teacher saying, what do you think is possibly happening in this image? Now, I want to make a point here. Possibly happening is extremely important. I always give it as an example. If I say to you, what's in my pocket? None of you will know what's in my pocket. But if I say to you, what's possibly in my pocket? You're going to say keys, a Kleenex, a lipstick, whatever. And you won't feel uptight about making suggestions because it's possible. It's not what is definitely there. So one of the aspects that opens this conversation is the use of hypothetical language. What do you think is possibly happening in this image? Now here's the first student. They're in love. What do you see that makes you think that they're possibly in love? Let's go back to the image itself. Because he's kissing her. What do you see that makes you think that he's kissing her? Because he's very close to her and it looks like they have their lips touching. So it's not just, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? But the student has to really define why he thinks what he's saying based on evidential proof in the work of art. What else do you see that leads you to think that they're possibly in love? He's floating. What do you see that gives you the idea that he's floating? His feet are in the air. He isn't standing on the red carpet. Then the teacher reiterates everything that that student has said. Fantastic. It seems to me that you are saying that they're possibly in love because you see them kissing. You also said that it appears that he's floating because his shoes aren't touching the rug. You also said that when people are in love, they feel as if they're floating in the air. This is very important. The fact that the teacher is reiterating what the student says gives the student the feeling that what he said was valuable. It also helps the teacher reiterate and strengthen vocabulary. Very often a student will say, that chunche that's in the corner, or the student will say, use a word that isn't correct. The teacher, instead of correcting the student by saying you used a wrong word, will just, in the reiteration, use a correct word. So it's a way that you can help your students enrich their vocabulary without making them feel uncomfortable because they didn't use it at the beginning. What other visual evidence can we find to support this idea that they're in love? Now another student comes up and says, the way she's looking at him. Can you describe the way she's looking at him as if I couldn't see the image? Well, her eyes are very wide open. She's staring at him as if she's hypnotized. Let's look at another part of the image. What else can you see that supports the idea that they're possibly in love? She's holding a bouquet of flowers that he's just given her. And then this goes on, and this continues for a while with in-depth questions that help have the students more profoundly analyze what they're seeing. Would anyone, and then the teacher says, would anyone else like to add something to the idea that possibly they're in love? Another student says, I think he's dead, and he appeared to her as a ghost. What do you see that makes you think that perhaps he's dead and is appearing to her as a ghost? Because he's floating in the air, and his face is gray, like when someone is dead. Do you see anything else that makes you think that he's a ghost? I think that maybe they were engaged, but then he died because she looks like she's in mourning. And it looks to me like she's remembering him, maybe because it's Valentine's Day. Okay, so what he was saying was very valid. Let me go back to that for a minute. That was very valid comment of that student. It wasn't a silly comment. It's very valid. And those are the things, for example, the teacher might say, what do you think, what do you see that makes you think she's in mourning? And the student could say, because she's wearing a black dress. And she has flowers in her hand that she'll take to the cemetery. So the students analyze what they're seeing and they talk about it. And again, you stop being self-conscious about the way you're talking because you're so excited about what you're talking about. Eventually, the facilitator can give contextual information about the work of art. It's not necessary, doesn't matter, but it's given often to deepen the conversation. Now I'd like to share with you that this work painted by Marc Chagall is called The Birthday. Now that we know the name of the work, what more do you see here? Another student says, there's a cake on the table. Where do you see it exactly? On the left side of the image, there's a yellow circle, and it seems to me that it could possibly be a cake with a knife. This part of the conversation will go on. It'll be more in depth. They might talk about the fact that it could be in a small apartment because you can see a bed. There's so much other things that can be developed in the conversation, but eventually the class is over. And the teacher will say, I loved all that we were able to talk about in our conversation about this work, but now we have to leave our conversation for today. Some of you thought they were in love because you saw blah, 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 and the teacher will reiterate everything that the students said. Others thought they were remembering when they were a young couple, and still others thought. And then this is very important that the teacher validate everything that the other students say. That's the challenge of the use of this methodology. The teachers have to remember things, but it works. And the students really feel good because their ideas and thoughts are valued by the teacher and the other students. It also gives the students the chance to listen to what the other students have said. At the end, there's always a moment of reflection when to develop the concept of metacognition and make the students aware of what they're doing. There's a reflection about the process. In this case, the teacher says, what question did I use often during our conversation about this image? What do you see that makes you think that possibly blah, blah, blah? To the point that we'll say, if someone says, I see a woman, the teacher can say, what do you see that makes you think that possibly the person is a woman? And the student has to describe the hair or the style of the shoes or something of that nature. Then comes the final reflection. In what other situations do you think we could apply what we do in our Piensa en Arte conversations in other areas of our studies or our lives? It's a very fun program. Teachers tell us that they often use it as a reward. This picture that you see is from Bejuco, all the way up in the north of the country near Punta Islita. And it's one of the first schools we started working with. At the beginning, you can see we use afiches, posters of the works of art. By now, just because of the immensity of the project, we use projections, not the actual posters anymore. Teachers tell us that when they often use it as a reward with their students. If you finish what you have to do right now, we'll have an extra class of Piensa en Arte. It reaches all students regardless of achievement levels and other subjects. It's the only time a student who never knows the right answer can raise his hand and say, I think what's happening there is such and such and such and such. And it gives that student a chance to feel that maybe he never knows the other answers, but his thoughts and his opinions are valid. So it really helps the autoestima of the students. It reaches all of them, regardless of their achievement levels and other subjects. In fact, especially at the beginning of the program, those who excel in the methodology are students who usually do not participate in class. A student used to always knowing the correct answer, the name of the provinces in Costa Rica, for example, will be less apt to participate when the results are more ambiguous. They want to be right and they're afraid to give the wrong answer. The results of the Project Zero evaluation, there was an evaluation by Harvard over the methodology as it was done in New York City. And the results of that evaluation, and what we're finding as well in Costa Rica, show that the children's ability to draw inferences about artwork transferred to their evidential reasoning skills when they were forming interpretations about the meaning of a non-art image in science or social studies. There's a wonderful story that was shared to me about a student in Caracas. The woman from the Museum of Modern Art who worked with us at the very beginning was in Caracas seeing a similar program, and she was visiting a school. The director of the school said, all right, we're going to go into a classroom. There are a couple of students at the back of the room. Don't call on them. They're very problematic children. Just ignore them. And so she facilitated a conversation about a work of art. And then one of the students at the back of the room was really, really interested. And when she said, in what other aspects of your life would this methodology be useful? The student raised his hand. And she didn't know what to do. Would she call on him? Should she not call on him? And she made the choice and she said, I'm going to call on him. So she said, in what way of life? And he said, the other day I was leaving my house and I saw a bunch of kids out on the street and they were with their knives and they were about to have a terrible, terrible fight. And I knew it wasn't going to be good. And I walked over to them and I said, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. What do you think is happening here? What do you think could possibly be happening? And the student said he stopped the fight. I don't know if that's true. She never knew if it was true, but it made everybody cry. And it's a very real thing. You know, when you're showing students the way that their opinions and their thoughts can affect others by the way that they speak, it's certainly a wonderful word and it's a wonderful story. The methodology also tends to contribute to a significant increase in students' awareness of the subjective or conditional nature of interpretation, both in interpreting the meaning of a work of art and in the context of interpreting the meaning of a non-art image in the domain of science. We had a fascinating experience in the classes we were working with in Las Minas, which is a school just outside of Santa Ana. Even though it's right outside, only 15 minutes really from Multiplaza, it's a rural school because of where it's located. I was facilitating the first session with a class and I realized only the boys were participating in the discussion. This happened again the second week, although the girls tended to whisper to each other. I asked the teacher about it at the end of the second session, and she mentioned that since this methodology was based on an opinion of what the students thought, it wasn't considered appropriate for girls to give their opinion in public out loud. Yes, they could answer specific questions. How much is 2 times 2? Or how many provinces are there in Costa Rica? But they shouldn't express their opinion or what they were thinking in a group conversation where there were boys and girls. By the end of the semester, however, the girls were as active as participants as were the boys. And that's super exciting because again, it shows how through the use of the arts, we can improve conversational skills. One of the most important aspects of the methodology is that students are encouraged to make detailed observations about works of art and to justify their interpretations with perceptual evidence that speak their observations out loud. The methodology promotes a culture of conversation in the classroom by soliciting comments from many students and encouraging students to respond to one another directly and to reason collaboratively. There's a social construction going on. They learn to appreciate the varied ideas of their peers and to respect the diversity of opinion that inevitably comes up. And this is of utmost interest to all of us who see the arts as a tool for conversation and community building. The students don't laugh at each other's ideas. They listen to each other and construct new interpretations together. And isn't that the basis for community? Now let's talk about another theme. How can we become more aware or conscious of our lives through the arts and to talk about what we see, what we feel, even though it's so difficult to share our thoughts? Don't get worried. I've turned off this is a black, it hasn't frozen. It's a black screen. We're going to do another exercise. That's why I have it black for a moment. First, let me ask you, when you read about 150,000 people were killed in an earthquake or 178 people were killed in a train crash, what do you feel? We know there are people dying from starvation, but can we actually feel it? War kills hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, but does it spur us to action? We know that almost 100,000 Syrians have been killed by other Syrians in the last few years, and yet does it lead us to think differently? We read the news at breakfast, we shake our heads, and then we continue to finish our cornflakes. But now we're going to look at a series of photographs, the use of the visual arts to help us feel, to better understand, to empathize. and then to talk about what we have seen and what we feel. Look at these images in silence, please. What can I sing? What can I paint? What can I dance? I sing, I dance, I paint reality to make people understand what is really happening and what are the roots of our deepest, deepest evil. Doesn't the use of the images bring the horror closer to home? The image of the mother over the child who's died of starvation. I think of that all the time. What if that were my child or my grandchild? She shows so much love for that child. And the image of the old woman. They're both photographs by the renowned Brazilian photographer, Sebastião Salgado. Famine, pandemic, drought, the hopelessness of flooding, the loss of loved ones to war. Through the image, we empathize, and hopefully this will lead us to more understanding and to the need to talk about that which we saw. Imagine the difference in the conversation in your classrooms after merely reading about devastation, COVID-19 deaths, hunger, and immigration, and the conversation after viewing images such as these. This poem, very appropriate to share here from the Vietnamese poet Thich Nhat Hanh, can begin a lengthy discussion where our ESL students will simply forget all but their need to express their feelings. And as we said earlier, it will encourage them to talk, talk, talk. Jiddu Krishnamurti writes of the urgent necessity to try to transform the world. He says, to transform the world, we must begin with ourselves. This is our responsibility, yours and mine, because however small may be the community we live in, if we can bring about a radically different point of view in our daily existence and talk about it with others, then perhaps we shall affect the world at large. And in order to help bring about this transformation, Maxine Green, in her book, Releasing the Imagination, urges us to develop our imagination. We cannot simply fantasize the disappearance of joblessness, homelessness, fatherlessness, or disease. It may be, however, that a general inability to conceive a better order of things can give rise to a resignation that paralyzes and prevents people from acting to bring about change. To call for imaginative capacity is to work for the ability to look at things as if they could be otherwise. Doing so, a person may become freed to glimpse what might be, to form notions of what should be and what is not yet. Once we become aware that what we assume is the normal way of life is really only one possible way of life, new paths will open for us to choose alternative ways to live, to value, and to choose. And that is why it's imperative to develop the imagination, not only in our children and in our youth, but also in the adult population. The arts help us to open and nourish this development. The arts help us to talk about them. And in so doing, the arts provide a profound way to encourage, promote, and develop conversational skills in our students. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation here, and I'd like to see if anybody would like to make a comment, if anybody has questions. Over and over and over again, we've seen this happen. And I have experienced it myself, where I stop thinking about what I'm saying, or I stop thinking about how I'm saying it, but I start thinking more about what I'm saying and my thoughts and my thought processes, which is why the tool of the arts in your classes can be so useful. Okay, Mark, I don't know if there's a way that you would like to help me facilitate this,
Sure.
but I'd love to hear comments, answer questions, and see what people think.
Great. So what we typically do is we ask if you want to write your comment or question in the chat to go ahead. I'll be monitoring that. And if you would like to open your microphone and say your comment or question directly, you have the ability to do that as well. So I guess while we're waiting for anyone to either write their name and comment in the chat or open their mics, we have a question from Luisa Ochoa. Would you encourage the use of abstracts for advanced groups?
Yes, definitely. One of the things we've discovered, we've chosen, there are 28 works of art in each year of the program. Actually, the third year of the program has gone down to 20 works of art because the teachers really don't have time to include more. And part of the program are visits to museums. So that takes up time as well. We have them all going from a very narrative, traditionally narrative work of art at the beginning to more abstract as time goes on. Kids have much less difficulty with abstract art than adults do. They open up totally. It's amazing. The 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students love it. And they're able to, you know, at the beginning of this program, people have asked us why we don't start with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And it's because 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders tend to give a shopping list. You know, you say, what do you see that's possibly happening there? Man, tree, house, sun, sky. Whereas kids starting from 4th grade have the ability to create a literary story going on about what they see in the work of art. You get something abstract, and there's not a literary narrative that can come on, but you get the students saying the most amazing things, talking about how can you get two colors touching each other without them blending together? And they're looking and they're telling you what they're seeing. And then sometimes they even talk about, I think this is possibly an angry painting. What do you see that makes you think it's an angry painting? And they'll say, because of the colors. Those are colors that make me feel angry. So yes, definitely you can use abstract art. We've used abstract art in adult groups. It's more difficult. It works better with kids in 5th, 6th grade and high school, and also some university groups. We just did a program with students who graduated high school and were having difficulty finding a way to place themselves into the world, the work world. So we were part of a one-year program with Fundación Monge, where we were developing these different skills with the students. And after a while, they felt more comfortable with abstract work. So yes, definitely, you can include it.
If anyone would like to open their microphone, you can go right ahead. I do believe that that is possible. Let me just double check that that permission is yes. You are able to open your mic if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, I love to use art, especially with the kids. But I always, of course, with being English teachers, I always like to get artwork that is relevant to a theme of the unit we're studying. But not just like a house. I like to get paintings of all different kinds of houses and make like a collage and then put that up there for them to talk about. And why don't you like that house? Or why do you like that house? Well, I like because it's crooked, you know, it's painted crooked, you know, or, you know, things like that. But the whole point is, I find when I was teaching kids, I find that pictures and getting them to talk about pictures was much easier than trying to get them to read something or try to learn the grammar, or try to do a vocabulary exercise. You could do everything by just showing them a picture and then having them talk about it. And you can actually check understanding, that they are using the words they've learned. They're using ideas that were not previously talked about. That's what I like. But also, I've done also the ink splotches, you know, the psychology thing with the ink spots on the cards. I've done that too. And what do you see? And why do you think that's a butterfly? Or that's an angry face. Well, why is it an angry face? It's just much more fun than actually opening up with, you know, a warm up with teaching a grammar point or teaching a grammar point. Basically, just let them talk about it. And then when you reiterate what they say, then they're learning the proper way to say it. They're learning the vocabulary they should do. And then I do it again, okay? Okay, we're gonna use the same words we've learned, but now here's a different picture. What do you think? And now it's been reinforced. And because they've already had a conversation about one picture, now they're gonna try to adapt it to another one using the unit vocabulary that they've learned and everything we've talked about. And then also trying to see what other words that are new or out of scope that are valid. So like for one time I had a picture and everybody's smiling and there's flowers. There was this blue sky in this painting. And this one kid said it was a sad painting. Now that was something I wanted to know why, because no one else thought it was a sad painting. Everybody said it was happy. And it's interesting that the frame of mind the child is in or the student is in at that moment, and they see a picture, it also stimulates a memory and an emotion that goes with it. And then the comments come out and it's very surprising. So it addresses how the child feels at the moment or how the adult student feels at that moment and what memories are triggered when they see an image. And
that's true.
Same picture the next day and the same kid will say it's a happy picture. But that particular day, that particular moment, it was a sad picture. It's amazing how it's so, you know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think a picture is worth 1,000,000 words.
That's interesting. I think the important thing is that the way I described the situation of the drawing of the two stick figures holding hands, they were just stick figures, but the hands were real.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not just that the student will bring ideas from the student, but they have to look at it. And it's important that the student could possibly say, I'm very sad about this picture. What do you see that makes you feel sad? I see that there are a lot of flowers and people put flowers at tombstones. And you have to, you know, it gives you the opportunity not to delve into the child's possible psychological problems or private sadness issues, but to get them to identify visual evidence in the work that makes them feel sad. That's something important. You said something else that just brought up two ideas that I wanted to mention. Remember in Schindler's List, Schindler's List was all black and white, except the little girl's red coat. It never said children were being killed by the Nazis, but it showed a little girl throughout many scenes with a red coat. And we were aware of her because she was the only one with color. And later on in the movie, when they showed many, many people dead in a hole in the ground, you saw the red coat. And that was like the same feeling as the baby that was washed ashore just off of Italy a couple of years ago of the Syrians that were leaving Syria in immigration. Those images, they're so meaningful to us and they help us talk about something. You know, I mean, to be able to talk about, oh my God, you know, all that business with the Syrian immigrants. What if that was us? What if we all had to leave Costa Rica, but nobody would let us out or nobody would let us in? And it gives us a chance to express thoughts in a very different way than if you just have current events in your English language classes. another thing, when you were talking about an aspect of grammar, one of the we provide lesson plans for the teachers. They get a sheet of paper like this size, and on the front it has the image, it gives the questions they should ask. On the back it has all the contextual information, some additional activities that relate to it, but it also will have activities to do at the beginning. And there's one activity that's very similar to what I had you all do before, where the teacher says, all right, we're going to go through the classroom and everybody's going to give one adjective that they see in the painting. The first person says blue, the next one says young, and the next one says man. Wait, man is not an adjective. Let's get another one, masculine. Okay, that's an adjective. Then after everybody's given a word and the teacher's written them on the board, she can say, now we're going to have a discussion about this work of art. Let's use as many adjectives as possible. So there's ways to incorporate the understanding and the learning of grammar while having a conversation and without it becoming so boring.
I think Isabel had a comment and she also had her hand raised. So Isabel, if you'd like to open your mic.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you because for teachers, English teacher, it's very important to use pictures in our classes. So I have been doing it for a long time, and sometimes I see other colleagues that they don't use that. So I thought I was doing something maybe bad or, and now listen to this lady. I can understand that I'm doing something different in my classes and that get me some, some feedback, and I'm really happy for that. And I really love art. It's a way to, to get into empathy with many things. Mm-hmm. And that's give to our students, even if they are children or teenagers, teach them also vocabulary and ways to critical thinking, but also to feel empathy with things around the world. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Isabel. I just want to share a comment. When we first started teaching some of the capacity, I don't know how you say that in English, giving the capacitaciones, the workshops, training. Yeah. Thank you. When we first started, it gets to a point where I can't speak any language anymore. When we started training some of the teachers would say to us, art's a waste of time. I don't like going to museums. Art's stupid. Art's only for communists. After the training, they love it. So, I saw a comment there asking if teachers can get students to love the arts. Let's start with how this program can get teachers to love the arts. And I mean, we used to say to teachers, we're going to meet tomorrow at the Museum of Costa Rican Art. And they would say, is that in front of the Correo downtown? I'm not kidding. People always say, we're going to meet at the National Theater. Oh, yeah, that's near the cathedral. It's amazing how many of our teachers in the public school system were not aware of art themselves. And through this program, that's changed drastically. The program's now been an official part of the Ministry of Education since 2007. So that's been quite a long time. It's like 15 years. And the way that it's changed the teachers is a blessing.
So we do have a couple of comments here in the chat, but I want to maybe give priority to the people who have their hands raised, and then we'll finish with those questions from the chat. So Jonathan.
Thank you. May I share something real quick? I'm talking about like if I'm granted permission to show something on the screen. Look. At some point when I was teaching at the university, I also teach at Universidad Latina. And from time to time, I get to teach poetry. So I show this picture to the students because I've always believed that painters are like poets. Something is being said, but what was it? You might remember this picture, maybe not. This was painted by Peter Bruegel, and it's called The Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. I had discovered this before, written by William Carlos Williams. And when the students, you know, like I ask them, take a look at this thing. And when I ask them to pay attention to the poem, things completely changed. And then I was wondering, if I gave them this picture, what would they write?
Mhm.
See, it's just like something that I've done before at the university
That's
level.
great. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Very often we have extended exercises where we have students write a poem or write a play or do something based on what they've seen in a particular work of art that moves them very much. So I don't think there's anything new or something in what we're doing. It's not something that no one ever did before. And it's very encouraging to see how many of you have used art in your classes. That's great.
Marcela?
Yes, I just had a question because I was wondering when you said, well, when you were talking about the pictures that you show to fourth graders and fifth graders and sixth graders, I'm sorry. So I was wondering, how do you choose the pictures that you show the kids? Is there like a standardized way of choosing those pictures? So all the teachers show them according to the same pictures according to their grade?
Yes. Yes and yes. Let me give you first, that was a double question. So first, how do we choose the works of art? The work of art has to be clear, and yet at the same time, it can't be too empty. There has to be something there that can be spoken of. A portrait is very difficult unless it's a particularly juicy portrait, you know, that you can analyze, like the way the person is dressed or the curtains in the background or something like that. So we're looking for works of art that will have enough that we can develop into a conversation, while at the same time, they're not too confusing or they have to lend themselves to the conversation. So we spend hours and hours and hours deciding which works of art. We choose the works of art. The methodology, we have a patent on the methodology in AcciónArte. The Ministry of Education has to use it the way we've taught them to use it, because otherwise it could just caer, it could just disappear. You could say, the teacher can say, what do you think about this? Oh, good. What do you think about it? Oh, nice. What do you think about it? I mean, that's not what we want. We want to develop the conversational skills. We want them to really look at it and to develop meaning together. And so we give the teachers the lesson plans, we give the teachers the works of art. There are between 20 and 28 works of art per year. And they're really from 1 to and up. They advance in different aspects. They have to be always a little ambiguous because it's more fun to develop a conversation when, there's the first work that we use is called Domingueando. It's from the Museum of Costa Rican Art. It's a picture of a carreta with a family on it, and there's a lot of banana leaves on the side. And there's a student who always will say, there's an ovni, a UFO. And we don't say to them, oh, you stupid kid, shut up. We say, what do you see that makes you feel that there could be a UFO? And the kids will say, it looks like there's 2 bright little red lights. And UFOs, the guys have red, they have red eyes and blah, 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 blah. That's all valid. What we want them to do is look at things. And so we have to make sure the works of art have enough stuff there that they can work on it without being too confusing. And so I think that answers your both questions. Yes, we do choose the works of art, and that's how we do it. Now, we have had samples of teachers who are trained, and because one of our biggest challenges is, I'm not going to say that every kid in Costa Rica gets this program properly. They don't. That's the fact of life. There are some schools where the directors hate art and don't allow it to happen, even though there's a directriz, there's a decree of the minister, of a past minister, that's been over the years reiterated that this must be done. There are schools where we'll go and the director of the school will say, oh yeah, I remember that. There's those posters, wait a minute, I have them in my drawer, and they just don't use it, but there are classes where we've gone out into the countryside in what they call here unidocente schools, where there's one teacher from 1st to 6th grade, and they love this program because it's the only thing that they can do with all 6 grades at the same time. And it's just such a joy. We brought a group of kids from Talamanca who had never been in San Jose, from a school that, very funny, you're all English teachers, so you'll get a kick out of this. The school is called San Box. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know anything about saints. I'm thinking, who in the world was Saint Box? It wasn't. The school was called the Sandbox. And over the years, it was changed from Sandbox to San Box. So these kids from San Box came, and the kids led the conversations. We brought them to the National Theater, to the Museos de Banco Central, and to the Museo de Arte Costarricense. And the different students took turns leading conversations with the works of art that they saw. Because what we try to do is all the works of art we choose, 80% of them are available for the students to come visit and see. And so when they come to see it, it's like, wow, that's my painting. Or it's like, oh my God, it's so little. I thought it was much bigger. I remember the first time I saw the Mona Lisa, I was a kid in New York, and I was so disappointed. It was so tiny and old looking. You know, it looked so much prettier in the book. But the kids tend to be really excited when they see their paintings. And the kids lead the discussions. It's very, very encouraging. It's very, very exciting. So we've seen that there are places where it happens much, much better than others, but yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Jody. That's also something that I was going to ask you. If you considered more like Costa Rican, in the case of Costa Rica, like for your project, did you consider to add more Costa Rican painters, for example, or more Costa Rican works of art instead of picking more from MoMA, for example, so the kids could see them in real life?
Yes, and it has a double value. We have 80% Costa Rican paintings, 10% Latin American paintings, and 10% paintings from MoMA. And the reason for that is we wanted them to value their own art. You know, we do something that's called compare and contrast, where after students deal with several works of art, we'll take two of them and we'll have a conversation about the two works. In the third year of the program, we use New York Boogie Woogie and Ciudad en Rojo, which are by Manuel de la Cruz. He's a Costa Rican artist, and they're both very similar in a lot of ways in the abstraction and the use of color, and they're both about cities. And there they're seeing something from MoMA, something from Costa Rica. And so it gives them, you know, how often do we see people that we know, and I'm not even gonna say how many of you raise your hand kind of thing, but we see people who go to museums always when they travel. They never miss the Louvre, they never miss MoMA, they never miss the Met. But when you say to them, when was the last time you went to a museum in Costa Rica? Oops, I never went. So what we're trying to do also is get kids to value the arts of their own country. And they get so excited when you bring them to a museum and they see the work of art that they previously studied. And now during COVID, we had a big challenge because how do you do this virtually? We've done it virtually. I was going to show you one of the videos that we've done and how we use it, but it was in Spanish and I didn't want to involve it in this. But another day you can see those, you know, and they'll be becoming available. But yes, we use mostly Costa Rican art so they can see it and so they can value it.
Jody, if you share the video, that would be fine, but we will upload it in the community of practice. I'm sure that now that you mentioned it, everybody wants to see it.
Okay, you have to give us a couple of weeks because it's still not out publicly, but once it is, I will definitely share it. My pleasure.
Thank you.
The more people that see it, you know, it's interesting. How do you take an interactive program and make it virtual and non-syncretic, you know, asyncratic, so that the teacher can use it for two purposes. One is we got this amazing grant from the International Council of Museums to do it, to create it. That was a special grant program for projects during COVID. And we did 9 videos, 3 from the National Theater, 3 from the Museos de Arte, from the Museos de Banco Central, and 3 from the Centro Cultural e Histórico José Figueres Ferrer. We wanted to reach 3 different types of museum institutions. And how do you work so that the teacher can still have interaction with the kids? So we developed this system, and it's like, it's been a lot of work. It's been a real challenge, but I think it's great. And it not only works for during the period of time of COVID, but it's not often that you can bring a group of students from Talamanca to San Jose, or a group of students even from Liberia to San Jose. We have some, we've used some works of art in the program that are from out of San Jose, but not that much. And so these are ways for teachers to use, they say, let's go visit the National Theater of Costa Rica. Bloom, the first video. So you'll see it eventually.
I think we have time for one final comment here so that we have a moment to look at the 2 or 3 questions that are still in the chat. So Vicky, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm so sorry I came in kind of late because of the internet connection. However, I'm so happy that we have the community of practice so I can go back and check all the info that you were giving us. So that's fantastic. The only thing that I wanted to add to this previous comment that I have is that art is part, it's like the human part. And for example, in my family, we have many artists except for me, but I try to use pictures in my classes because they are really necessary. They give you a lot of information, a lot of input. And I was using pictures from my sister and my brother because they are kind of, they are painters and they are real artists, except for me, as I said before. But I just wanted to say art is wonderful, is the best. Maybe because we're not looking at art as we should, maybe because of that, we are losing our humanity. That's my feeling. Thank you for your great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you for what a beautiful comment that is. You're right. Art brings us closer to our humanity.
So 2 final questions here to wrap us up from the chat. One easy and one maybe not so easy. The first one is someone was asking, where can we find high quality images to work with? I assume outside of a simple Google search. And then the other one is it possible to teach kids to love art? I guess dealing with that resistance.
The first one is easy. Yeah, online. You can find images online without any problem, not just through Google. I would suggest going directly to the museums. The Smithsonian has a remarkable program where they let you share their works of art, and most museums have programs. So I would suggest going directly into museums and looking for works of art. If you know that you want to use a specific work of art, but you can't find a good image of it, Google will tell you where that work of art is. And then if it's in a certain museum, you can go there or just visit a museum. The online programs now for museums are fascinating and you can see the works of art. Can you teach students to love art? I believe you can. I believe they have much less resistance than adults have. They find it very natural. Kids like to draw. They like to create stories. And looking at art, when you bring art to students in the right way, I attended a special training program on this methodology. Philip Genuine was the person who developed the visual thinking curriculum for MoMA many years ago. He then left MoMA and started his own company. And part of his company was to train people in the methodology. So I took a training session with him. And we were in a museum and there was a woman who was a docent from the Isabel Stewart Museum in Boston. And she said, I'm out of here. I can't do this. I can't let students tell me what a work of art is all about. I have to tell them. A work of art it's painted by this person in this year, and this is what it says. I can't do this. And she left. And it's what made me realize what makes certain students love art and other students not. If you tell a student, this is painted by Picasso in this year from the blue period, it certainly shows you Cubism, and let's go on to the next painting, they're gonna hate art. But if you say to them, look at this work of art, what do you think is happening there? Look at it. And we make our students look for 30 seconds to a minute without talking, just looking. And anything they say is valid as long as they can find visual evidence for it. In one of the, I was in one of the breakout rooms and someone used the word autism. And I questioned what, I shouldn't have said anything. I promised I wasn't going to say anything, but I got involved. And I said, what can you see in the work of art that makes you say autism? That's what I would have said if it was in a classroom. Often I have students say, that's got to be Liberia because it looks like something that my uncle would do and he lives in Liberia. No, you can't, that's not let's go away from that. What we're going for is, what do you see in the work of art? What do you think is possibly happening? And if you can show me visual proof or visual evidence for what you're thinking, it's perfectly valid. The least important part is what the painting is called or who painted it. We do give contextual information only when it strengthens the conversation. So if the conversation is going rapidly, terrific, and we're almost at the end, we won't even say anything about the contextual information. But at a particular point, when the conversation seems to be dying, we'll bring something up. For example, the paintings by Felo Garcia that are called Tuburio. We use one of them called Tuburio in Punta Arenas. And it shows, it's a fantastic picture of structures of tuburios. And there's a quote by him that says, the tuburio is a way that creative parents resolve the problems of their living situation. What a beautiful thing to say about people living in a slum. And very often we have kids who live in tuburios. And when they hear that line, they get so proud of their parents, you know, and it's something that we can say, and then it enriches the conversation again, where they say, yeah, it is creative. Look, that one's red, that one's blue, that one's green. And so again, yes, you can help young people love art. You can help any age love art. You can help adults love art by allowing them to talk about it, by allowing them to converse over what they're seeing and just jump in and get involved in the work of art.
Thank you so much.
We're getting a lot of thank you messages here in the chat, so make sure you check that out, Jody. And we wanted just to say thank you again for donating your time to our PD Talk events this Friday afternoon. So if everyone can either write a message in the chat, or if you have your cameras open, maybe just give a thumbs up or wave your hands to show Jody how much you enjoyed the talk. So thank you so much for that.
It was a pleasure. Nice to meet everybody.